Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, assalamu alaikum, peace be upon all of you. So, interacting with kids and nurturing kids when you're in a role over them, such as a parent or teacher, nurturing kids according to the goals that you have for them is a skill. It's a skill, like many, many other crafts in life are a skill. It's a skill that needs to be based on learning, needs to be learned intentionally, needs to be thoughtful, needs to be based on knowledge, and it's skills that to an extent need to be practiced. Now you can practice it in the moment with them, like it is practice that you get on the job to a fair degree, but there are things about it that need to be understood intentionally. So people, it's not the case that just because someone was raised by parents that they can go be the effective parent that they want to be. Same with schooling. It's not the case that just because someone went through school and was a student and had teachers, that they can then go be a teacher and be an effective one. It's not the case at all. There's craft and skill and learning that needs to be done with all of it in order to be effective. So when you're in these roles, part of the nature of these roles with young people is that you control their actions, or you have to have control over their actions to a fair degree. And in nurturing them, the way in which you control their actions is going to have a direct impact on the way that they turn out in life. And specifically, the way you control their actions, it's going to play a huge role in conditioning the type of motivation that they will develop for life and in their approach to life that they're likely to hang on to later in life, because it relates to habit formation. So foundationally, something to understand with nurturing young people is ways that motivation operates. And I talk in these series about things that you need to understand foundationally about young people, because the reality is nurturing young people is a moment-to-moment thing. It's something that is practiced moment-to-moment, day-to-day, with consistent time with them. And of course, first to it, you have to be in positions to have consistent time with them. So just like what I was saying before with teenagers, how it's a foundational thing you have to understand about teenagers, that they're insecure and they're emotionally intense and they have high defense walls up. You have to understand that foundationally. How to get the defense walls down, how to deal with that, I'll go into specifics. But when you're with your approach with them, you have to understand that as a foundation. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about motivation and what you need to understand foundationally with that, because when you understand these foundational things, that starts giving you the base knowledge that you need to be able to execute the proper action and say the proper words with them in that moment-to-moment life that you have with them. And people, when they ask for advice on raising young kids, being parents, or teaching them, people always want to know the right words to say or the right things to do with them. And I mean, there's different specifics to talk about with that. But the reality is that you have to formulate the right words to say, the right way to deliver lessons in a moment-to-moment basis. And you have to know these foundational things in order to be able to do that effectively. And you also have to know how to get yourself in the right mindset and the right frame of mind in order to be able to deliver that. And those are all things we'll talk about. But regarding motivation, everyone who nurtures young people, and also just for your own life and the younger people who are watching, this is important for you to know, because you will either, one, be in a position one day where you're nurturing young people, and two, knowing this stuff now is very effective tools for you to reflect upon at this point in your life and to think about where you're going. So there's two types of motivation. There's two types of motivation that can get nurtured into young people, or at least two broad categories of motivation that you can understand that a person can have. An extrinsic motivation is one, and intrinsic motivation is the other. Now, extrinsic motivation means being motivated by something external to yourself. Intrinsic motivation means being motivated by something internal to yourself, specifically meaning your own thought process and your own reasoning. Now, extrinsic motivation can be of two types itself. Extrinsic motivation can be positive or negative. Some positive examples of extrinsic motivation are, say, money. That's an external motivator for people. That's a positive external motivator. For a little kid, giving them candy, giving them toys. In school, maybe giving them extra time at recess or giving them a party at the end of the week or this type of thing. Those are all external motivators. They're positive. They're positive because you're giving them something that they want. That's the definition of a positive extrinsic motivator. But it's still an extrinsic motivator because they're motivated by something outside themselves. Negative extrinsic motivators are negative types of consequences. So getting timeouts, getting playtime taken away. Corporal punishment is a form of external punishment, and and society wide, like things like incarceration are extrinsic motivators to people. So with these two types of motivation, you can use motivational tools to control young people and to prompt them into certain actions and prompt them into the actions that you desire them to do. But the way that you motivate them is conditioning them to have habits formed with the way they respond to motivation. And the things that you're conditioning them to do, when young people are conditioned to only respond to extrinsic motivators, whether they're positive or negative, the actions that you're trying to condition them to do are much less likely to last in their life because they're not internally motivated for them. So they're more likely to give those things up, even if you had them doing the things that you wanted them to do. But when intrinsic motivation is developed, then the habits that they're inculcating along with intrinsic motivation, it's much more likely to last longer into life. Now, how do you inculcate intrinsic motivation? Well, one, you have to access their reasoning, and you have to explain out reasoning to them a lot. And you can do this with even very, very young children in a developmentally appropriate way. But it's something that has to be done from children from a young age. The second big thing with intrinsic motivation is those defense walls I was talking about before. With teenagers, and of course young kids have them too, and all types of people can have them. You can't nurture intrinsic motivation when these defense walls are really high up in the relationship or in those tense moments with young people. So you have to be tactful about reducing these defense mechanisms that young people have in order to just begin to access and reason out their intrinsic motivation with them. And we'll talk more about this.